what does it mean to you to be an integrated man?
Wow. Yeah, it's all of that. And so it's being full spectrum. And I was fascinated to have discovered at a time of crisis for me was what was happening in my life that I discovered work of Carl Jung, quite frankly, but it was a neo-Jungian by the name of Robert Moore and the mythopoetic men's movement that was led by another guy named Robert Bly. And I started learning about masculine initiation, as well as the archetypal man, the quadrated psyche, according to Jung, which is the cross, right? It's ultimately the cross, the quadrated psyche. So the liberating or the ascendant, and also the horizontal, the earthly aspect of being a man, spirit and earthly. But that quadrated psyche, you see, it's an archetype that you see everywhere. Just watch, I'll tell you what the mythological language around it, but then I'll point out where you see it everywhere. So to be the fully integrated man is to be king, warrior, magician, lover. There are 4 aspects of a man. He's thinking, feeling, being, or doing. That's all it is. I mean, and I say that's all it is, but that's deep. You can, like Robert Moore, you can spend a lifetime digging into any one of those quadrants, right? Thinking, feeling, being, doing. We're not anything else. In other words, you can't be doing anything else because then you're doing. You can't be thinking of yourself in any other way, or you're thinking. And then there's feeling. But the one that really is most existential is being, right? And that's the Imago Dei. That's the image of God. That's the King, Christ the King, Jesus Christ, being itself. It's the King aspect is, if you notice a king crown, it's always pointing up. It's about the existential. And so we're spiritual, we're mental, we're emotional, we're physical. There you go. You got those 4 again there, right? So the fully integrated man is spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, right? The crown, the mind, the heart, and the balls. Fully integrated. That's the integrated man. So it's that makes it tangible, right? Thinking, feeling, being, doing. Spirit, mind, heart, balls, sex, body. King, warrior, magician, lover. The quadrated psyche. So, but then the question becomes, how do you integrate this? And so it's layers. And whether you acknowledge it or not, whether you see it or not, whether you're conscious of it or not, we're going on a layered journey as a man. I mean, there are people who study this archetype. There's a really good book I mentioned to a friend yesterday called The Amazing Development of Men by Alison Armstrong. And she talks about the phases of being a man. When you're a boy, you're a page. You're running around with your fake sword and you're playing war, and you look up to the teenage boys because they're actually on the horses riding. The teenage boys are the older boys. Now they're knights, right? They're little warriors. They're playing. Well, if in our realm, you're playing football. I remember being a page watching my cousin play football. He had the shiny helmets on. They'd come out on Saturdays at the game field, which was across the street from my house, football field. They would the band would play, and they would run out. They'd rip through the banner, and then their helmets are smashed. And it was whoa! That's when you get to be like a young warrior, right? A young knight. That's what they should call it, a knight. And then as you grow older, you become a warrior, right? You're probably at a stage where you're hustling, trying to build your business. You're doing your podcast. Trying to make that money, trying to be impressive to other men and to women as well, and make your place in the world. So now you're in warrior stage where it's grinding every day. You're just fighting for your place in the world. And then you get to be a late warrior. And of course, I'm not following the king, warrior, magician thing, but I'm just showing you how this all happens in layers. But use a different language you can use. Then there's late warrior. And late warrior is when you made it. It's whoa, I'm here. I did it. I've got some money in the bank. Maybe you have a wife at this point, and maybe you have a house with a mortgage, and you're all right, I got it. Then you start asking yourself, what is this all really about? And then you go into a catabasis. You go into they call it a midlife crisis because they don't understand it, but it's a going down so that you can arise again. And the only way you become a king is if there's a death. There's no king without a sacrifice. So that late warrior has to go into a tunnel. He has to go into a downward spiral where he purges all the things he collected from the early part of his life that no longer serve the royalty that he's headed towards, the king that he's going to become. And so you could call that a catabasis. You could call it a midlife crisis. And for me, it wasn't midlife. I was 36. But these are patterns. I can talk all day. But 12-year patterns, or 12-year patterns where these are predictable patterns that you can see happening. 36, I was at the peak of the thing. And so at 24, I had the same experience. And like I told you, I met my wife when I was 14, 12. That's when I was getting into trouble. But you go into a catabasis, you go down, and that's called, you could call it shadow work also. There's a time for shadow work. I think a part of the problem with having too much information in our culture is that like young men that are like, you're in a stage that you shouldn't be doing shadow work yet. You should be fighting. Like you come back from war and then you do shadow work. But a lot of these, young pussies who are like, oh, I gotta like self-care. I gotta take care of my wounds. It's like, no, you don't lick your wounds until you go to war. You haven't gone to war yet. You still got milk in your teeth. So you got to go fight. You got to get really wounded out there. And then those wounds really start showing themselves to you. They're magnified when you're in battle. A lot of these guys who think that they're overcoming things, and you're 21, bro. Like, just go work. Then you go down, and that's when after you peaked. That's when you do shadow work, and then you arise as a king. And there's a whole association with that. And the final stage is elder. The point of me saying that is that the idea of being a fully integrated man is layers, it's journey, it's experience, it's awareness. It's happening whether we consciously take hold of the process or not. Being conscious of it is helpful because then you don't freak out when you see certain things happening. And now I mentor men, so if I see where they're at, usually based on their age, you can tell what phase they're going to be in. It's easy to say, hey, look, I got the map. Right now it's a dark spot. Don't worry about it. It's going to clear up in about 3 years. Just keep doing what you're doing. Put your head down. Don't overthink it.